Recently, it's become known that there's enough clothing in the world right now for the next 6 generations of humans. So circular fashion is essentially trying to close the loop on design and development through to end of use, so that when a garment is at the end of its life cycle, it can be responsibly moved on. It will become the driving force to ensure that this industry sustains somewhat of a responsible method and delivery from start to finish. And both the brands and consumers have a role to play in that.
Looking back, I didn't think about whether or not I even wanted to do uni or if that was the best avenue. It just felt like that's what you do. Yeah. And I feel as though that there's really not much offering other than go to uni, get that experience, and then go get your entry-level job. There's that pathway, and I don't think that that's necessarily the right way with especially with creative pursuits. So that could be why the students just aren't really responsive to the teaching. I think that there's just that resistance where they haven't given it any thought what it is that they actually want to do, and are just kind of going with it and getting it out of the way. But I've always been an advocate for industry experience above all else. There's so much you learn in the first 3 months.
Oh man, I can't begin to describe how many times I have reached out to different people in the creative landscape and said, I want to just volunteer for you because what you do is really cool and I want to get some exposure to it, because I didn't see what I wanted to be part of and what I wanted my career to be. That wasn't a degree. And so when I looked at that at unis, I always thought, I would really love to have a bachelor, because I think if you've got that behind you, that looks really good for your education.
Exactly.
But I mean, it looks good. Whether or not that's how it's perceived is different. But at the time, what I wanted to do was not in a course outline. And that really, it was hard to process.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic as well, right? Because like when you are creatively inclined, the intention is to try something new, something different, to take the ingredients of different areas and to create your own thing. But then when you're going into some formal education, it's very structured, it's very rigid, and the avenues that you can go beyond that are still very much compartmentalized as well. So that's a challenge. Challenge for you. In this subject then of future fashion, you'd be touching on circular fashion. Yep. Tell us about that.
So I think of it now, circular fashion is the baseline. So it's not a nice to have, it's a necessity in the industry now. So circular fashion is essentially trying to close the loop on design and development through to end of use, and making sure that those 2 points come together, so that when a garment is at the end of its life cycle, it can be responsibly moved on, and hopefully it's recycled, it's upcycled, it could be broken down back into raw materials and then put back into the design and development process again. Circular fashion, I think everyone strives to incorporate it into their fashion brands, but essentially it will become the driving force to ensure that this industry sustains somewhat of a responsible method and delivery from start to finish. And both the brands and consumers have a role to play in that. It's a pretty difficult one to turn the wheels back on now because of how much waste is out in the world. Recently, it's become known that there's enough clothing in the world right now to for the next 6 generations of humans. I think that's a pretty tough one to grapple with, especially in an era of hyper-consumerism. People are wanting to buy constantly. They're changing their wardrobes 3 or 4 times a year. The trends backing that as well. It's one that you can't stop immediately, but through certain circular methods and concepts, we can slow it down, but still keep the hype cycle, going, because that won't be ending anytime soon.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in all that, because once upon a time, we didn't consume fashion this way, right? Like, if you want to go back 80 years ago, right, when people bought things to hold on to keep. I say 80 years because, we're talking after pre-World War II. And since then, especially in the last 30, 40, 50 years, it's been a lot of churn with that. Like, what do you think was the catalyst in a value system? Why do you think that we went that way?
Commercialization and the opportunity to produce faster and get more product out in the world quicker. Supporting that was certainly the .com boom and taking shop fronts to online shops. So it accelerated how people could shop and what they could access, where and when. And it just meant that the brands making those moves online could see the potential of how much money they could make. And then it just strengthened those supply chain ties, which completely uplifted everything, just became faster, and the consumers were loving it because all of a sudden they could find whatever they wanted online, but also get it very quickly.
So it's a bit of a chicken or the egg situation when consumers want more, but then you also have companies just making more. And then we have this drive, this cycle of it's almost fickle, right? Like how we would buy something but not even appreciate it for what it is. So it's more even in the buying process. That is where we get that rush of endorphins. And I know I'm guilty of that. It'd be shopping online and browsing online. And then when I get the item, it's just subsided. And then it's just like, okay, on to the next one. So I suppose that is what the industry kind of has just been encouraging.
Yeah, it thrives on that moment where someone has a desire to buy something. And that's what they keep feeding the machine.
I want to try to explore how did that kind of plays into other areas? Like, what is it about us that want to consume? And then fashion has just been has been exploiting that desire probably more than anything else. And and to your point, you have the access. I know online shops and even something like Amazon, which just gives you access to so much and being able to deliver to your door overnight. But then now we're moving towards this fashion. Was there a particular moment or a catalyst for this shift?
Look, there's been many brands for several years already driving circularity within their business. Look at Patagonia. They've been leading the charge for a really long time. You read anything to do with Patagonia, their values, what they really stand for, it has been loud, and they've been proud of that for a long time. The catalyst really has been the transparency of the industry in the past decade or so, where people are reporting on the textile waste, the poor working conditions, the tragic accidents that have happened in, say, India, where people have died. Those unfortunate circumstances make people around the world stand up and realise that's not just a factory where people are making things for the rest of the world to enjoy. That is a factory where they're making clothes those people are earning below minimum wage, and the garments that are being sold are actually in the shops around the corner from where you live. Now, in that moment, you start to connect the dots and you think, hang on, is that item of clothing that I just bought from Zara or Gap or wherever that I paid $50, $60, $70 for worth a life? And that is a really, really hard thing to swallow, because it's not. There is no life worth in this world losing over clothing. Because of that investigative reporting, stats follow, and then more and more articles come out about how bad the industry is and that there is very little being done about it. Fingers start being pointed at the brands because they know what they're doing and they're not taking responsibility. That is a brand problem then, because consumers have a choice of who they purchase from, and as soon as they hear that they were underpaying workers in India or Bangladesh, wherever, you start to think again in that decision-making process, do I want to support something like that? Because that supply chain incorporates not only a business, but the people working for that business. And then at the point of purchase, you can say, do I want to support that? No, I don't.
Yeah, values in brands and how we associate ourselves with that, that's, to what you were saying, it is becoming more transparent. We're starting to then interpret what it is that we see, and then we bestow the values on the brands. It's not enough for them to tell us what it is that they value, when behind the scenes, the inner workings contradict what it is that they're displaying on the surface level. So once we see that, we question whether or not the values that we have aligns truly with these brands. So it's asking more of the brands as well. That you have to have more than just a commercial intent. You have to start operating with integrity. And if you're not operating with integrity, then what sort of clientele and what sort of follower base are you trying to build here? But then there's also, on the other side, a lot of brands that are just coming up. There's a lot of churn. So it's almost like we're at a point where there's a lot of conversation and there's a lot of brands that are in a position to then start implementing more circular type processes. Does it stunt new up and coming brands wanting to then implement themselves within the cultural landscape?
You can build a circular brand from get-go. It doesn't have to incorporate every aspect of circularity. You can start with certain stages that suit your business model and the fashion direction. So no one out there is saying you can't start a fashion brand without having ticked off these certain things. Look, we've got fast fashion out there. We can't stop that right now. But for challenger brands who are really tapping into a cult following, there's definitely a need for that, because people want to be part of a brand. They want to align to an aesthetic that reflects their lifestyle. Those micro communities are really important for people to feel like they're part of something. It is the responsibility of the brand, though, to keep in mind that they're the ones producing products. So whether they make a choice initially and say we'll just do smaller runs of each range so that we're not overproducing, that's one step they can take to ensure that they're not adding to textile waste. It might be the materials that they're using. They could switch to a more sustainable fabric that it can be recycled into new textiles. These small steps initially are what will create an excellent foundation for them to bolster additional circular methods in the future. But by starting out and thinking what all you're going to do is sell thousands of hoodies because it's a really cool logo that people have responded to well on Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, whatever, you will essentially be putting an expiry date on your brand, because trends churn through social media so quickly. Yeah. But the end result of that is overproduction of clothing that the brand owner is stuck with, and you're looking at 3 to 6 months.
A lot of these brands, when they're starting off, they're not necessarily developing the cuts or so they are going to other brands that are wholesaling, like T-shirts or hoodies.
Yeah.
So I'm going to assume that because of this movement, those particular brands would have a bit of pressure put on them, social pressure put on them, to start implementing more sustainable process. I assume that there's going to be a lot more of those type of businesses and those brands that are going to be coming up. People that want to start up a fashion brand and print a logo on garments, they can identify who these other manufacturers are.
Yeah.
Locally as well, here in Australia?
Yep, 100%. Yep. So getting business back on shore in Australia is a big priority for the fashion industry, because a lot of the factories closed down several years ago to go offshore, cheaper, obviously, and they could manage large quantities offshore. There's a drive to bring it back on shore, that we do have the facilities to manage large quantities, but the fact that it's onshore can add to the bigger story of sustainability and ethical production within Australia, that we have the resources and capability to do so and support our brands through that process. Doing good is good for business, and the more that we can get the industry back on track in Australia doesn't mean we stop offshore manufacturing. It just means that anything we want to do, say as a test run like a sample production, we can do that locally. We can make sure that it's exactly to the specifications that we want. We can also ensure that we're using Australian textiles and raw materials. So our a big one for us is our cotton. Things like that people do when they're buying, look at the label and see, is it Australian made? What are the material composition? Have the raw materials been sourced from Australia, or have they come from overseas? What percentage includes recycled materials? Little details like that people are becoming more interested in. So if you can bring it back on shore and create that process and make it part of your own brand story, then that becomes a lot more of an important connection made between brand and consumer.
I remember back in the 80s, there was so much strength and value in that Australian-made logo, and that seems to have disappeared entirely, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Or even the that wool mark as well.
Yeah.
I don't see that anywhere.
Yeah, there is a push to bring all that back, and somewhat of an expectation to start prioritising those labels back into garments. There's also an accreditation process that brands can go through, which showcases where they are being an ethical and sustainable brand. Things like that really instill confidence in consumers too.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there a benchmark, or is there a process right now to identify, or like a grading system to identify what is considered ethical? Do we have an ethical standard?
Yeah, it's and the company is called Ethical Clothing Australia. So they have a very robust system. It's not compulsory for brands to opt into, but they have an excellent program available to Australian brands.
Right. So it's almost like how that is an equivalent of the B Corp.
Yeah.
So going back to circular fashion, is it something that's a bit top heavy, where it is the bigger brands that have the resources to be able to recycle a lot of their wares. I know that brands like Adidas and Nike have been selling a lot. They have ranges where they have recycled a lot of their the rubber. Is it something that is just for the moment going to be top heavy and then having to eventually trickle down? That these bigger brands, they're the ones that are going to be setting trends, not just in processes but just in style as well, and the aesthetic. So when you're having a brand that is or an aesthetic that is going to be somewhat recycled, does that then mean that a lot of the pieces that we'll be wearing or designed will be having to be more timeless?
Yeah, in design, there's always those classic pieces that, however you style it, will have an edge. More often, we're finding designers are trying to experiment with new shapes and styles that are adaptable or modular. And so you can unzip half a jacket and pair it with another colour of the same jacket, so that you can switch components and parts of it out quickly to make it look different. For a very long time, there was stigma around not wearing the same item twice or 3 times and being seen in that. That's becoming less and less, but the problem is people still want to buy something new because it taps into that rush. There's still no solution to any of it because consumer behaviour typically is a bit fickle, and accessorising is a more economical way to create a piece and have it feel like new. In saying that, there's still a lot of textile waste when you are manufacturing garments. So on the other side of that, brands are looking at how they can create zero waste patterns. So they're designing clothes, and within one pattern, they are ensuring that there is very little to no textile waste on the other side of that. That is a great move for the industry. And then when it comes to the wearability of that garment, it's about offering options to that consumer about responsibly moving that item on when they no longer want it. And that could be providing repair services. So, for example, jeans. If we get rips in jeans and we think we no longer want them, well, actually, they could be re-dyed, repaired, and brand new again, because denim is a very long-lasting fabric. So what is old to someone can be renewed and brought back to life for a second go for the next owner. And that next owner doesn't have that same feeling of it's old anymore. It's old and I don't want it anymore.
Yeah, I was reading an article and they touched on Melbourne Fashion Week. There was a couple of designers that re-exhibited archived range, and that was their push, is that we are not really going to be, we're not here to showcase something new. We're here to showcase what we've previously done and just to present it in a new way, right, as a new presentation. And I was surprised to see that they teamed up with eBay as well. And eBay seemed to be pushing or really promoting and also putting money to it with the circular fashion and trying to support startups in that space, and also then providing a platform, and they already have that platform to sell the pre-loved goods. With what you do with your business, you try to implement ways and you identify ways of extending the life of a garment, extending the the presence of a brand. Can you tell us about what some of the innovations that you guys work with?
Yeah, so my background is marketing, and to some degree I hate a lot of aspects of marketing. And I say that lovingly, because my aim is to shift some of the things that I dislike about marketing. Metarial is a product of that attitude. So in the world of circular fashion, transparency is a big driver. To be circular, you need to know who the stakeholders are and bring them to the forefront so that everyone becomes responsible, but we can see exactly who is involved and the process. Uncovering that is quite uncomfortable for a lot of businesses for a few reasons. One, they don't want their competitors to know who their service providers and stakeholders are. Fair enough, you don't need to name names. It is purely about just showcasing the journey that the garment has gone through from start to rack, pretty much, to retail. My aim with Metarial is to focus on the post-purchase consumer experience. So that is the moment that someone buys something new from a brand, and then the journey that garment goes on from that point forward. That is an untapped marketing space, I believe, and one that carries a lot of weight with regard to consumer attitudes and the garments they own. So very quickly you buy something new and that's really exciting. The moment it gets into your wardrobe and you think, yeah, I've got something new to wear, you wear it and the shine, it goes a little bit after a while. However many times you wear it, you think, I'm over that now, I'm going to send it to the op shop or I'm going to list it on a pre-loved marketplace. The idea is to essentially put a digital trigger in those garments, and a digital trigger is a QR code or an NFC tag, near field communication tag. NFC is in all our smartphones now, and that's how we use tap and pay at point of sale wherever we are, coffee, lunch, restaurant, shop, whatever. That technology is incredibly underutilized right now because it's quite new, but especially in fashion, the industry is still lagging behind quite a bit when it comes to adopting technologies and innovation. It always has been. It's a very traditional industry. But by putting a digital trigger in one of these garments, after it's been purchased, it means that the owner of that garment can re-engage with the brand at any point by using their smartphone to tap the tag or scan the QR code. The strategy behind that then becomes whatever the brand wants to introduce that wearer to in that moment. So if there is an exclusive campaign that you want to promote only to the owners of that range, you've got them in a captured moment. If you want to send them to your Instagram account or to an upcoming release range or a really cool event that you've got coming up, give them that information and let them re-engage not only with the brand but the garment in that moment. And you are adding value consistently. So it doesn't just become a garment hanging in your wardrobe and you think of it every now and again. It is giving you something every time you interact with it. That's starting to shift the attitude then of how you value the items in your wardrobe. And then as well think, okay, well, this brand actually wants to engage with me. So I'm going to keep looking at their promotional marketing material or whatever, or attend their events, or just have a stronger alliance to what that brand stands for, and you become a very loyal customer.
That really puts it back on to the brand to come up with ways to utilize that technology. I can only imagine that there will be brands that would that may not be entirely ethical with how they utilize that. Well, I mean, like nothing too drastic, but if it's just going to be constant promotion, I can't imagine a consumer wanting to engage with it. As it is, just the getting emails in my inbox, promotional emails, that's too much for me. And then having to be actively seeking it, I don't know if I necessarily would. So it is going to put the onus back on the brands to find creative and innovative ways to extend the life of that particular garment. What examples do you have of the brands that you've worked with that are at the forefront of that have really taken that leap and have implemented just creative ways and innovative ways of using that technology?
Yeah, so the idea is to be more creative, and it takes the focus away from sending another email campaign. The brands that we're working with are very heavy on storytelling. And that becomes a priority in each and every garment that they make, because once the garment is sold, then the only connection back to the brand for the consumer is really to go and check their socials or their website. For them, each and every garment really does have a story to tell, no matter who owns it. There's something there to share that they want the garment to tell in its life cycle. So the NFC technology in that circumstance is that the owner can always tap on the NFC tag and read more about that particular garment, how it was made, the design process, some of the inspiration, perhaps what the brand wants the consumer to know in that moment. And also it's a great vehicle to communicate care instructions. So yes, we put our clothes in a washing machine, but what happens in that process is something that's not talked about very often either. So a lot of clothes that are made of synthetic materials will shed microfibers. That is a pollutant. So each and every wash, we are also contributing to the textile waste around the world. Those little things you can easily forget about in the moment, but the more often you are reminded of your impact, you can do something as well to change it. So by re-engaging with the brand in that moment, you can be reminded of how best to take care of your items of clothing, and also that increases the longevity of that item as well.
I like the idea of having the passing on this pre-loved garment to someone else that is going to love it like new. And when we spoke, you were telling me about this brand, the handbags, this handbag brand that you bought that manages its own Facebook group to ensure that it is the right piece is almost going into the right hands as well. Would you see that a lot of these brands are going to start developing their own type of marketplaces, or would they just be utilizing platforms like eBay, who I assume is why they're encouraging and supporting this circular fashion, because obviously they see a lot of commercial viability on their platform. So would you see that brands would be utilizing an established platform already, or would they be creating their own?
So resale is a huge business now. It's in the $1 billion range globally. Just at a regular fashion stage, but also in luxury goods. The brand that I was talking about, local handbag range, Sans Beast, they have a cult following because it's a vegan brand. Their values have always been very, very strong from the start against animal cruelty. So people will surround brands like that and hold it very tight to their own lifestyles. Sans Beast created a Facebook group for resale purposes so that their customers could sell the items that they no longer want, or say that they're looking to buy a particular bag that may not be available, or they would like to just buy pre-loved. The resale market right now for brands, they can utilise resale as a service platforms, which enable customers to list those items onto an existing marketplace. And at the point of purchasing it new, they can actually get an estimated price of what they would get at resale. But then you do have brands just creating Facebook groups to make it easier for their consumers just to be part of that group and get to know also what's happening directly from that brand. The other side of this is We haven't really moved into that space just yet, but resale as a service for brands will lead into an additional revenue model for fashion. So brands, they're counting on that new purchase to be made by their consumers, but they will start to see that if they create their own resale marketplace or partner with an existing resale marketplace, that they can earn a bit of a
it's another that additional
bit
revenue
off
stream.
that
The
sale.
reason I ask is only because what level of control would they want to grapple with that resale component? Because as you were saying, that's a massive market and it's only growing. And you look at how op shops they've been, that's a culture in and of itself. When people would intentionally want this op shop look and feel to their aesthetic. So if a brand is going to implement that process of offering the resale service, it gives the buyer an opportunity to purchase from that brand as well, not just from a secondhand marketplace. They're able to then implement different experiences into that buying process. And then, and as we discussed, that when they purchase off that brand themselves, then they're going to be identified as now a new customer.
Yep.
So then they have that life cycle there as well.
Yep.
So I was just curious as to seeing whether or not the direction is going to the business is wanting to then consolidate that practice and bring it into the fold of their current practice.
They will, because they won't want to dilute their brand. So currently you can walk into an op shop and have Shein products next to, really, really high-end brands.
Yeah.
And our local brands that do have a higher price point, they want to contain that brand as much as possible and the experience and loyalty attached to it. And so containing it within their own space of resale will actually benefit them in the long term. Making those items accessible to those that might not be in a position to go and buy it new.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a mindset shift and also a commercial directive shift when it's always been, for the most part, been about selling new and then seasonal change and then 3 months later selling a new range and then a new range and a new range. So it is going to be a commercial mindset shift first and foremost. And then once you start having brands reselling their wares on their own platform, it almost makes it okay. It gives it gives customers and society at large permission to buy that way, right?
Yeah.
Because it is, I don't want to say stigma, buying from an op shop. It's not a stigma. That's not the right word, but it's a very different shopping experience.
Yeah.
Especially if what you're looking for is to buy something new.
Yeah.
And it might be okay to buy something pre-loved, but having that new experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that could work.
Yeah, so right now brands are focused on the customer buying new. In this pre-loved space, the brand is able to connect with the second, third and fourth owner of the garments that are in circulation within their resale network. Those customers who are buying pre-loved from within that network, they are no less valuable than the customer who bought it new. If you look at, say, the data around the customer lifetime value of what one customer might bring in for a brand and how often they're buying new, that's what they're looking at. But if you open that up to consumers who are buying pre-loved from a brand they really align with, that amount then could be a lot more than someone who's buying new once a year. So you need to really support and understand that those who are buying pre-loved are also some of your most loyal customers. And they are very much part of this whole experience.
Now, to tie it back into your marketing background and your understanding of it, what other facets will need to change or will be an outcome of this shift?
Providing more avenues to consumers to move their clothing on responsibly. So at the moment, landfill is where they end up mostly. A huge percentage of clothes that end up at op shops actually don't get put in store. Sadly, a lot of it does go to landfill as well.
I'd imagine that wouldn't even be sellable. I think it would just be a lot of people just like, I don't want this anymore, or I can't wear this anymore. I don't want to feel as though that I'm putting into landfill, so I'm just going to give it to op shops.
Yeah. Recycling is increasing, and that is amazing. We need more recycling facilities on shore so that the items don't go to landfill. They go to a recycling plant instead. There are some complexities around recycling textiles, particularly around the trims. So zippers, buttons, all of that needs to be removed. There's also quite a significant sorting process of identifying what materials are in a certain item. So is it 100% cotton or is it synthetic? They both are treated differently. At the moment, there's some great businesses in Australia who are enabling brands to recycle their clothing responsibly. And then overseas in India and China, more is becoming available that we can send large quantities to as well. They get recycled and made into, say, products such as carpet underlay, furniture, building materials. So it's all being reused in a way that is helping society. The other issue is around making those points locally more accessible to consumers at the time that they are wanting to move something on. So right now it is an op shop that we think of. Brands can start implementing small things like a take-back scheme where they might have I don't want to say a bin, but something within their physical stores that they can have consumers just pop in their old items. They get sent back to their warehouse and sorted, and they can go either into recycled or they can be upcycled or repaired. And another avenue to resell items becomes available there. It is just thinking about what you can handle logistically, and we are talking about hundreds or thousands of tons of clothing here, which is difficult for a brand to have to manage as well. But it will become something that everyone has to consider and start making pathways within their business to support, because it's no longer an option to just send it to landfill and forget about it.
Yeah, so there are a lot of knock-on effects from this. It's, how everything affects everything. You start manufacturing garments that are made to last, and even though they may not necessarily last forever, they'll be good enough to be able to be recycled, and then having that also then considered in that process of that whole design process. So there are a lot of layers. There are a lot of layers, a lot of things that need to shift within each business before you even start to consider the cultural ramifications of it.
Yeah, and there is a lot spoken about educating the consumer on how they can dispose responsibly. But a lot of innovation is occurring at the start around the textiles and even just the raw materials being produced, and experimenting with new ideas and concepts with raw materials. Say, for example, this isn't something that I've seen yet, but we talk about designing or manufacturing for longevity? What if we don't design and make for longevity? What if it's more temporary, and that the fabric being used lasts, say, several years, but there is an expiry date, and you can then put that through a process and it dissolves.
Biodegrades, right?
Yeah, biodegradable. Yeah. So the pressure isn't on it filling up landfill. It just becomes something that we can, as the owner, have control of. Because whether it biodegrades or you throw it out, at that point, the person's attitude is, I no longer want this. So, the monetary value it once held, that person was willing to let go of anyway.
Yeah, so then it just has to be considered whether or not those materials can be created in a way that is going to be environmentally friendly, cost effective, and resource friendly as well. Yeah, there are many ways that this can go, whether or not you're building for long term or building for short term. So it's a matter of then also just adapting to how we already function. Technologically, why fashion has been so far behind? Like you said, they're very traditional and they're purist. But then at the same time, there are a lot of brands that aren't that way.
So a lot of examples of where technology has been incorporated into fashion, some of it has been perceived as gimmicky and a very temporary experience to heighten sales. There are fewer people in a digital transformation position actually paving a path around efficiency and utilising technology as a means to actually push the circularity cycle itself forward. Mm-hmm. So several years ago, I embarked on a bit of a journey to talk to as many people as I could in fashion and ask them about digital transformation and what was happening in this space. I was surprised at the time that no one had actually heard of digital transformation in fashion. And their idea of technology in fashion was, say, the point of sale system or their website and connecting their warehouse system and inventory to their online systems, to their physical store inventory. You know, that was kind of the extent of what they understood as being technology. There are some outliers, of course, those that are pushing the boundaries just with consumer-facing digital experiences, such as augmented reality, beacon technology as well, that can be put into physical stores that gives the retail owner an idea of the high traffic flow that's occurring in the store, or what people are gravitating towards on racks, what they're pulling, what they're not returning. Then also connecting that with RFID in the change rooms, making more of a convenient experience. Say if someone is in a change room, they have an item but they need another size, they don't have to leave the room, they can just use a magic mirror inside in the change room to request a different size, and the staff can assist them there. So that's kind of where it was bubbling for a little while. Then with the rise of blockchain, that became an area that people were very interested in, especially when it came to transparency, because they were thinking if we use blockchain, we can ensure that every stage of our supply chain is verified, and we have responsible stakeholders participating in that supply chain and the verification of our process. It hasn't been adopted widely because with technology comes a cost. And if you don't understand it, or you can't really put a value to it from a business perspective, then people will avoid it. The thing is, though, technology provides efficiency, and data. And with data comes more insights into who your consumers are to provide more personalised experiences. So delving into what it can do and benefit a business will always come out on the better side, but it's just an area that people aren't familiar with, so they're not exploring it.
So then what needs to happen is you need to have some more rogue operators coming in and just thinking, fuck it, let's just try this out and see which way it goes and be leaders in this innovation. I guess that's essentially how it's always operated as well. And in areas outside of fashion, it's, you know, just the early adopters or the ones that are looking or willing to use technology in an innovative way and just seeing what comes of it.
Yeah.
Cool. So what are you working on at the minute?
So all about Metarial. We are very passionate about getting NFC tags into clothes for consumers to engage with consistently and get data back on that as well, so that we can keep improving what we're learning. But yeah, our intention is to be one of those outliers and
it's pushing technologies.
Leaders to show that marketing is moving into a new phase, and it's going to be an incredibly exciting experience for consumers.
What does the fashion industry, in terms of technology, what will it look like in the next 10 years?
10 years is a long time.
It is a long time. Let's pare that back in the next 5 years.
In the next 3 to 5 years, I would say it won't look like anything that we're seeing today. And driving that will be AI. Okay. Generative AI can be used in all parts of the fashion industry right now, from early design exploration through to augmented reality and, you know, being able to put ourselves in clothes that we've never seen before. But then we will be relying upon technology to ensure that what we own is real. So authentication and the fight against counterfeit products. And then the way that we are flipping between physical and digital every day will become a lot more blurred. And so how we move and buy and use the items that we have will become very seamless.
I like to see that. I'd like to see how. I mean, I've there are a lot of artists that work with augmented reality. There's one particular artist, Bon True Love, incredible graffiti artist, and all his works. He has. I don't even know if he has developed his own app for this, but there is an augmentation to it. So he's had exhibitions where he's had his work displayed. You walk around with your camera and there's like live moving parts. Be interesting to see how something like that would be implemented with fashion, and people walking around with their Apple Vision Pros and just seeing abstract works coming out of fashion. So where can people connect with you? Where's the best place to find you?
Website, metarial.io, and LinkedIn. Just, shout out onto LinkedIn anytime.
This has been very eye-opening and has really given me a lot to think about. I've rarely consider what is going on in the fashion industry, but I know that fashion plays an integral part in how we live, how our culture develops, how we engage with one another, how we express ourselves. It is something that I'm trying to be more mindful of. And the last time we spoke, I mentioned how you dress the way, not just how you feel, but how you want to be perceived. And making a choice to not adhere to fashion is also a choice, right? Wanting to dress as daggy and non-conformative is a choice, and that is something that you want people to know of you, whether or not you've consciously made that decision. So there are massive implications that fashion has with how we function as a society. So this has been such an eye-opening conversation. Thank you so much for jumping on.
Thanks, Wayne.